Imagine standing in a high-security lab, the air thick with the scent of ozone and industrial cleaner, staring down at a dull, off-white block that looks less like a weapon and more like a discarded hunk of modeling clay. Your heart rate should be spiking after all. You've seen the movies. You know that one wrong move, one stray spark, or one clumsy slip-up usually results in a fireball that levels the block. But here is where everything you've learned about danger over the last 40 years fails you. If I handed you a 3-pound sledgehammer and told you to take a full-force overhead swing at that block, would your muscles lock up? That's your survival instinct. Talking the part of you that knows power is usually synonymous with volatility. But C4 is the ultimate liar. You could strike it until your arms ache. You could throw it against a brick wall, or you could even drop a lit match onto it and watch it burn with a slow, lazy flame like a common candle. It is disturbingly indifferent to the world around it. This creates a terrifying question for anyone who values logic. If the most powerful conventional explosive in the military's arsenal ignores fire, impact, and friction, then what kind of invisible, violent force is actually required to wake it up? We're about to dismantle the myths you grew up with and look at the terrifyingly precise science of why C4 is the only substance that is as stable as a rock until the exact microsecond it isn't. When you hear the term plastic explosive, your mind probably jumps to something high-tech or synthetic. But the reality is far more tactile and frankly bizarre. If you were to pick up a piece of composition C4, the first thing that would strike you isn't a sense of dread, it's a sense of nostalgia. It feels exactly like the modeling clay you used in school, or the putty you might use to fix a leak in the shed. It's soft, it's malleable, and it holds its shape perfectly. This isn't an accident of manufacturing. It is a masterclass in chemical engineering designed for a very specific type of work, for a senior demographic that values tools that do exactly what they're told. C4 is the ultimate utility player. You can mold it into the keyhole of a reinforced door, wrap it around a steel bridge support, or press it into the cracks of a bunker. It stays where you put it. But don't let the Play-Doh texture fool you. That soft, squishy exterior is actually a sophisticated matrix designed to suspend tiny, hyperstable crystals of a chemical called RDX. In the world of explosives, RDX is the heavy lifter, but on its own, it's far too sensitive to handle. The plastic part, the oils, and binders is the cage that keeps the beast calm. It's a strange irony to consider. The very thing that makes this weapon so deadly is its ability to be handled like a child's toy. But as we're about to see, that toy is holding a chemical secret that refuses to react to anything less than a literal supersonic shockwave. To understand why C4 is so unnaturally calm, we have to look past the dough and into the crystal structure of its primary ingredient, RDX. If TNT is a hot-tempered amateur, RDX is the disciplined professional. Chemically known as cyclotrimethylene, the RDX molecule is a tight ring of nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen atoms. It is a masterpiece of high energy density, but it is also incredibly stubborn. Imagine a spring-loaded trap that is so tightly wound it should snap at a touch. Yet the latch is so precise it requires a specific, heavy key to release. This is the patience of chemistry. In its pure form, RDX is a white, crystalline powder. If you were to look at it under a microscope, you'd see sharp, jagged edges that look like salt. But here's the problem. Those edges are a liability in its raw state. If those crystals rub against each other to hard friction, they could create a localized hotspot and detonate. This is where the engineering of composition C comes in. The military doesn't just want power, they want a tool that can survive a plane crash or a stray bullet. So, they take these stubborn RDX crystals and coat them in a plasticizer, matrix usually a mix of dioctyl C-backet and specialized motor oils. This coating acts like a chemical lubricant and a shock absorber. It's the difference between a box of loose glass ornaments and those same ornaments encased in thick Hayden City foam. This coating is what gives C4 its patience. It allows the explosive to be dropped from a height, run over by a tank, or even shot with a high-velocity rifle without so much as a spark. You are looking at a substance that has been chemically engineered to ignore the world until it is told, in a very specific language, that its time has come. Since we've established that a hammer blow or a blowtorch is nothing more than a nuisance to C4, we have to address the lock and key mechanism. How do you actually use it? In the field, Using C4 isn't about lighting a fuse like you're in a 1920s cartoon. It's about starting a high-speed chemical conversation. This is known as the detonation train. Because C4 is secondary explosive, it requires a primary explosive to wake it up. Think of it like a massive, heavy flywheel that is impossible to turn by hand. You need a smaller, high-speed starter motor to get it spinning. This starter motor is the blasting cap, usually the size of a pencil stub. The blasting cap contains a tiny amount of much more sensitive material, like lead azimuth. When this cap is triggered, usually by an electrical charge, it doesn't just burn, it detonates, creating a supersonic shockwave that moves at over 26,000 feet per second. This is the only key that fits the lock. When that shockwave hits the C4, it passes through the plasticized matrix and slams into the RDX crystals with such violent speed that it doesn't give the molecules time to melt or burn. Instead, it shatters the molecular bonds instantly. This isn't a combustion, it's a molecular collapse. Within microseconds, the solid clay transitions into a gas that expands to a volume nearly 1,000 times its original size. This process is so fast that the human eye cannot even register the beginning of the expansion. It is the ultimate binary system, 0 or 1. Total stability or total devastation. There is no middle ground, and there are no second chances. When you look back at the history of modern construction and conflict, the transition from traditional dynamite to composition C4 represents a massive leap in how we manipulate the world around us. Before the mid-20th century, the gold standard was nitroglycerin-based dynamite, invented by Alfred Nobel. But dynamite had a terrifying flaw. It sweat. As it aged, the nitroglycerin would leak out of the sticks, forming a highly sensitive oily film on the outside that could detonate if you so much as breathe on it wrong. For the generations tasked with building the infrastructure of the Western world, the bridges, the tunnels, and the dams, this was an occupational hazard that claimed far too many lives. The development of C4 in the 1950s wasn't just about making a bigger bang. It was about the pursuit of absolute reliability. This material was the culmination of decades of research into composition explosives, designed to survive the rigors of global transport and extreme temperatures without becoming a ticking time bomb in the back of a truck. It allowed engineers to perform surgical demolitions, because it could be pressed into precise shapes. It meant a bridge could be brought down by cutting through specific steel I-beams, rather than just leveling the entire area with blunt force. This level of control changed the landscape of the Cold War and industrial engineering alike. It moved the world away from the all-or-nothing risks of the early industrial age and into an era where we could master the most violent forces of nature. With the same precision we use to calibrate a fine watch, it stands as a testament to an era that valued the marriage of overwhelming power and foolproof safety. If you've spent any time watching the action blockbusters of the last 30 years, you've been lied to. Hollywood has a specific visual language for explosives that usually involves a red digital clock ticking down, a mess of colorful wires, and a substance that seems ready to blow if the hero even looks at it funny. But perhaps the most persistent myth is the beeping bomb. In reality, C4 is completely silent, odorless to the human nose, and, as we've seen, remarkably boring to look at. In the movies, a stray bullet hitting a pack of C4 causes a spectacular fireball. In reality, that bullet would likely just pass through the clay or, at most, cause a small, smoldering hole. The fear that entertainment sells us is rooted in the idea of the unpredictable threat. We like to believe that danger is loud and obvious, but the true nature of C4 is far more clinical. There is no ticking. There is no red wire versus blue wire in the way you'd imagine. The real danger isn't the stability of the explosive itself, but the sophistication of the trigger. When we see a bomb on screen, we are seeing a dramatization of our own anxieties about losing control. By stripping away these Hollywood myths, we start to see C4 for what it actually is, a high-performance industrial tool that is as predictable as a hammer, provided you understand the laws of physics that govern it. This transition from movie magic to hard science is where the true fascination lies, because it reminds us that reality is often much more calculated than the chaos we see on a cinema screen. If C4 is as stable as a rock, silent as a grave, and can be molded into something as innocent as a child's toy, how do we actually find it? This is where the invisible threat meets the cutting edge of modern defense. For decades, the primary line of defense wasn't a machine, but a biological marvel. The canine nose, a dog's sense of smell, is thousands of times more acute than our own, capable of detecting the minute off-gassing of the plasticizers used to keep the RDX stable. However, as technology progressed, we needed something more consistent than a dog that might be having an off day. This led to the development of ion mobility spectrometry, or IMS. The technology behind those small white swabs you see security agents use at the airport. When they wipe your luggage or your hands, they are looking for microscopic traces of the RDX molecule. Because C4 is so sticky due to its clay-like texture, it leaves behind a chemical fingerprint that is nearly impossible to completely wash away. These machines work by ionizing those particles and measuring how fast they drift through an electric field. Since every molecule has a specific speed or signature, the machine can identify C4 with near-perfect accuracy in seconds. In recent years, we've even moved toward tagans, chemical markers added during the manufacturing process by international law. These tagans act like a scent-based barcode, ensuring that even if an explosive is stolen or used decades later, its origin can be traced back to the exact factory and batch. It is a constant game of cat and mouse. As we create more stable and stealthy materials, we must simultaneously invent more sensitive eyes to see the unseeable. It's a comforting thought that in a world where power can be hidden in plain sight, the laws of chemistry eventually give the secret away. As we wrap up our look at the most misunderstood substance in the modern arsenal, we're left with a profound realization about the nature of human ingenuity. Composition C4 is a masterclass in contradiction. It is a weapon that refuses to fight until it is told to, a destructive force that is safer to handle than a gallon of gasoline, and a sophisticated chemical compound that feels like a lump of putty. It represents a shift in our history from the era of accidental power where a dropped lantern could burn a city, or a leaking stick of dynamite could level a mine, to an era of absolute control. But that stability is a double-edged sword. The same properties that make C for a reliable tool for an engineer also make it a permanent fixture of our world, because it doesn't degrade or sweat like the explosives of the past. 102.4, created decades ago, is just as lethal today as the day it was pressed into its mold. It is a legacy of 20th century precision that will likely outlive the very structures it was designed to build or destroy. When we look at that block of plastic and realize it can survive a hammer blow or a raging fire, we aren't just looking at a weapon. We are looking at the pinnacle of our desire to master the physical world, to create something that possesses overwhelming power, yet remains completely, utterly under our command. It serves as a reminder that the most dangerous things in life aren't always the ones that scream for attention, but the ones that sit quietly on the workbench, waiting for the right moment to speak.